don't get back home until Sunday.
So I need 2 t-shirts
Yeah.
for the entire week.
Yep. I can just move on.
You ready for this, dude?
For sure. Always. See you tomorrow.
Hi, Chris.
Nice to meet you. Don't do that.
Wow, this is really fancy.
You know what's cool?
Jeez.
Is like in Cleveland, if you need a finger, it opens the door. In Boston, where they're from, if you get a finger, it means something completely different.
There's only a certain part of the area.
Oh, we're on.
3
Okay.
seconds. We're on.
Okay.
So what's going on today?
So Zinc gets all of our carriers together once a quarter in the same room. It's just so much better. It sounds crazy, I know. That doesn't exist in most places, but trust me, it should. And so we've figured out how to make that happen where everybody feels like they get something, and we can explain to carriers how we're doing, where we're struggling. They get a sense of the global issues that are happening. Today is special because it's the last one of the year. They'll find out how we did in 2019. We'll set our goals for next year, which is always kind of the big reveal. And today, they get a big Be Atomic update. So these carriers have been watching us build Be Atomic out of Zinc for 3 years. So now it's real. Now everybody's in the room. So it's game time.
You ready for the Be Atomic update?
I am super pumped to see how carriers react and respond when an agency has data to present to them in a way that they've never been able to see before.
All right, guys. So what are we doing today?
Woo, carrier meeting.
Every year, Zinc Insurance, Seth, Chris, Geralda, the whole team invites all of their carriers into one room for a carrier annual meeting. The goal of this meeting is to discuss Zinc's performance. So what did they do right so they can continue doing it? What did they do wrong? And what are they going to fix? Now, here's the thing. When we think about performance, we think about really high-level goals. This is the amount of money I promised this carrier. This is the amount of premium I promised that carrier. This is the retention that I promised, etc. But Zinc takes it to a whole new level because they dive into why they were able to meet some of those goals and why they weren't able to meet some of those goals. Everything is out on the table. And the way that they do this is through data. Now, I could play the whole thing. Just hit that button and let the 2-hour meeting run right in front of you. But there's a lot packed into 120 minutes. There's so much that I'm afraid if I hit play, you're gonna miss some of it. So I'm gonna break down the 120 minutes into 4 videos. It's gonna be a series over the next 4 weeks. There's also gonna be podcasts that relate to the content as well. But the 4 categories are retention, service, sales, and marketing. Okay, so why am I doing this? Why am I sharing this private meeting, which granted there were a bunch of people in the room, but still a pretty private meeting on Zinc's performance? Why am I laying this out in the open? Because I want you guys to understand the power of having this behavioral data and having a system that can be flexible enough to truly analyze it. I didn't necessarily put these 4 categories in any order, but I definitely may have started with retention because it feels like everyone else starts with sales. Just retention has a special place in my heart because it feels like no one ever talks. So, retention. Chris, take it away.
Really, really awesome from a data standpoint, which gets us to understanding how we retain business more and better. We talked about having an overall goal of 93%, and as the year kind of closes out, 92%, we're right ahead of goal by just a small margin, a couple hundredths of a point, but right on target.
So often when I talk to or have heard people talk about retention in any small business, not just insurance agencies, success is throwing out the highest reasonable number, because no one would believe if you threw out 100. If you walked around saying, yeah, my retention is 100, I'm amazing, everyone would look at you and be like, you're crazy, dude. That doesn't exist. Show me a business where that business has achieved perfection, where they've never once lost a customer. Perfection, that type of perfection is impossible. So take away a couple percentage points for humanity's sake, and you end up in the low 90s as an average, this is how amazing I am retention number. But it doesn't have to be some meaningless percentage that we use to boost our credibility, our legitimacy in front of our peers, or wield to motivate our staff. What if instead of trying to feign perfection, a retention point had more meaning, it had more context?
So, and let me just give you the input that, because you may not think about retention as a carrier, you may not be thinking retention of how it affects me. But what that has done over the last 4 consecutive months, that 1 point has raised my cash flow over the last 4 months by at least $7,000 or $8,000 a month. So retention, the process is starting to put cash in my bank. Over the last 4 months, cash flow has been up. 1, new business written in the middle of the year or beginning of the year is starting to pay commissions. And 2, the retention, the way we are gaining, my cash flow is getting better. So when I sit down to plan in 2020, I now can look at that personal lines producer hire, that campaign, those things, because now I have a steady increase in cash. Life is better at Zinc when we retain higher. So it's an extremely important point. 1 point may not sound like a lot, but it is at this point close to $7,000 a month, and for many in this room it's more.
If 1 point is $7,000 a month, that is ammunition. I mean, an extra $7,000 a month could get you a whole new service team member to be more efficient so that you can scale. Could get you another producer. It could be another boost in your marketing budget. It doesn't have to be just a cool stat. It has a quantifiable operational repercussion. So now that we understand the weight of it, how do we improve it? How do we claw back 1 more percentage point at a time?
We have a whole number as an agency, but where is our biggest dips, right? So personal lines, that's drilling that figure you just saw down a little bit more. So that's, we're a little bit behind the curve in personal lines. And I think what that really reflects to us from a management standpoint is that we got to do better in personal lines. And we had a really, really tough year in that. I mean, again, we weren't selling as much, and then when you can't override that loss of business by bad service, by bad process with growth, you start to see that we're behind goal on that. Not by a wide margin, but under goal. And that's one of those things where you think about how do people impact what we do, how we keep customers. And in a shop of 6 service people, 1 or 2 can have a wild impact that bring you down under that goal number. And that's where we had to kind of make some changes, make some switches, and try to be better. To demonstrate that in commercial lines, you look at that and we're ahead of goal by almost 2 points. Right? So our commercial lines team is, not only are we writing a heavy amount of commercial lines, as you could see with the trucking piece, but we're keeping it. So I think we're spot on there with our commercial team and what we can realistically expect. And if I'm only losing 114 policies a year through that team, I'm pretty excited. Now I can drill that down by a premium figure, but even then, it might tell the tale of, well, yeah, you only lost 114 policies, but surely the premiums are higher. But again, not to bore you guys with graphs in this meeting, but that we found that to be not the case. The volume in personal lines has actually brought us down a little more than we would expect.
Guys, did you see that? Chris was able to break down that agency-wide retention number. He could segment it by line of business, and when he compared personal lines to commercial lines, he realized that personal lines was losing 3 times as many policies as commercial lines. Just over 100 in commercial versus over 300 in personal. Okay, now obviously this doesn't get us to the solution. This just says, hey guys, something is going on in personal lines. So Chris sat down with the team to discuss. Side note, how amazing is it to not only be able to track to this granular degree what's going on in the agency, but also to be transparent with your team, to be confident enough in what's going on that you can be transparent with your team to get things fixed. That is the power of data. It's not for somebody to hold and say, I have all the power, but to share as a team and work through these problems and find solutions through that collaboration. Okay, back on. So listen to what the team said, Personal Lines team said, in response to the discussion Chris had with them.
So I've gotten in with the team on a weekly basis. We talk about why policies are canceling, and that was the conversation as a byproduct of the retention conversation. So it's, okay guys, well, we're gonna get in every week and talk about all the things that cancel, because I want my team to really feel the pain, you know? I mean, for Seth and I, you see that number and it's like, oh my goodness, we don't want to bleed dollars out. We don't want to lose policies. So when service people I've tasked them with calling every single time. Don't just take the cancellation request in and process it. Call them up.
Let's freaking fight for it.
Yeah. Earn it either back in that call or next year. Right? That's the expectation for these guys. But as a byproduct of that, people say, well, surely, I mean, if they don't pay their bill, what am I supposed to do?
Interesting. So they say that cancellation requests are happening because people can't pay their bills or won't pay their bills. Jerks. So Chris, being a data dude, wants to verify. For the next few months, Chris has every team member notate why the cancellation in the system, this isn't like on a piece of paper, in the system, in Neon, why the cancellation request came through during the actual process of canceling. So during each individual cancellation, they're explaining, they're saying to the system, they're telling the system why this cancellation is happening. Now, maybe at an individual level, it might have felt like, oh, it just feels like a lot of people don't want to pay their bills. Or maybe that was the easy answer, right? Because that's the client's fault. It's not our fault if people won't pay the bill. I mean, I can't do anything about that. But when you look at the data in an aggregated form from a 30,000 foot view, without the bias of humanity, here's what Chris found.
We've got that down to the reason why customers are canceling. There's an expectation of that group to pre-fill that field in for us on a predetermined list of why they've lost that. And I would tell you that, spoiler alert, in personal lines, it was they moved to another agent. And it's not a price thing, it wasn't I didn't pay my bill thing. They were leaving us.
So this led Chris to look into a number of areas in the service department where some friction could have arose, but one in particular stood out.
They tried to call us and they weren't picking up in time. They weren't returning calls or doing what they said they would do.
Our miss rate with some people in our agency and personal lines was, what was our highest miss rate?
Missed 57% of the calls.
Our highest miss rate was 57% on personal lines, which you tell me who would stay with me? Who would stay with Zinc at a 57%? I don't answer the phone.
And because of their work introducing more accountability with answering calls, handling calls in the personal lines department,
we've made some changes in how we're working and who's working. We haven't had a missed call or complaint in how many weeks?
3 months.
3 months now, we're complaint free. So data is changing behaviors inside of Zinc.
Ooh, data, it's so good. It's so good, so good.